I am Dr. ME Maebana. This morning, I'm going to present to you the unit 2 of our module, that is EDS 4804. And the topic for today revolves around none other than designing advocacy plans for people with disabilities. And our learning outcomes for study unit 2 are as follows. When you have carefully listened to this presentation, you will be able to identify the need for advocacy support. In addition, you take informed decisions when clarifying roles for significant others and design and maintain a conducive environment to maximize productivity and participation for all. And our lesson for today is structured in the following way. We will have the introduction, identifying the need for advocacy support, clarifying advocacy roles of significant others, designing and maintaining a conducive environment to maximize productivity and participation for all. Defining the concept, conducive environment, creating a conducive environment for persons with disabilities, and the things that can hinder participation in the environment. And lastly, we will have conclusion. In the interest of time, in this unit, as a postgraduate student, you will learn more about advocacy plans that can be designed for people with disabilities so that they can engage in more structured and practical advocacy work and activities that could achieve reasonable change in their lives. In this unit, we will also focus on the need for support for people with disabilities, their advocacy roles, and ways in which a conducive environment can be created to maximize their productivity and participation. And identifying the needs for advocacy support. Bramovich 2018 tells us that there is a great need for advocacy. The need lies in the fact that the community lives within a particular social reality, and the community needs to be conscientized about these social ills. Someone needs to ring a bell, talk about these issues, and this is advocating for the eradication of the social ills. And it can take advocacy to influence change in the society. Let's look at the following structure. When trying by all means to interpret this structure, you can interpret it in many ways. We see one particular student on a wheelchair and someone else standing by his side or by her side, showing him or her a particular direction. This is an indication that people on wheelchairs do not have a place in the mainstream schools, and some of the teachers do not accommodate learners with disabilities in their schools. And the above picture indicates that the learner is surprised to be shown the way out of the place to be accommodated. You don't belong here. Therefore, the need for advocacy support can be in the field of education. And the bar of learner is being discriminated against and excluded from mainstream education because of his or her status of disability. Even if there is a legislative framework that promotes equality, often it takes advocacy to have this rise realized in the institution. Learners will remain excluded until a group of individuals or organizations embark on the advocacy for the rights of all those learners with disabilities are actualized. Education White Paper 6 as a legislative framework does exist, yet learners are still marginalized. So there is a great need for advocacy support to advocate the right of persons with disabilities. It cannot be assumed that now that the Education White Paper 6 as a legislative framework exists, the rights of learners with disabilities will be realized. The need also might be that in rural areas, the communities might not be familiar with the provisions of the legislation. It takes advocacy work to create awareness, educate, and mobilize the communities through advocacy support. Even in the field of employment, the Employment Equity Act exists as a legislative framework, but a greater number of people with disabilities are marginalized in the field of work. This is also indicative of the need for advocacy support. The need to identify advocacy support lies in the fact that public awareness must be realized. And this is best seen in the fact that one of the greatest problems facing the world today, according to the UNESCO 1994, is the growing number of persons who are excluded from meaningful participation in the social, economic, political, and cultural life of communities, while policies clearly articulate that learners must be taught in accordance with their needs. Hiraima 2016 holds the view that the practice of inclusivity has its genesis in the Ubuntu values. In other words, the need for advocacy lies in the identification of the Ubuntu values. When the need for advocacy is identified from these new perspectives, it can serve as the basis and the precursor for transformation. The other need for advocacy support is to educate the public about development in legislation. Therefore, South Africa has experienced the upsurge of activities with increasing emphasis in legislation, research, and practice on the provision of inclusive program. The move towards inclusive education has been widely embraced as an ideal model for education, both in South Africa and internationally. This is indicative of the need for advocacy support. There is a great need to promote advocacy support to enlighten the community about both global and national trends in social transformation. This is seen in the development program of 2000, which has to achieve universal primary education by 2015. The other important need for advocacy support is to mobilize resources, both human and financial, towards a particular society. Through advocacy support, one can rally people behind the movement to address social reformation. This is to ensure that the buy-in of the society to support the advocacy campaign, clarifying advocacy roles and significant others. Advocacy is usually an endeavor of a group of people who have similar goals or who are like-minded. They come together to share their lives and experiences. They agree to embark on a particular cause that affects the community. Usually, it is the different organizations and individuals who want to see changes in society. Their advocacy targets specific social issues. There is a great need to promote advocacy support to enlighten the community about global and national trends in social transformation. This is seen in the development program of 2000, which has to achieve universal primary education by 2015. And the other important need for advocacy support is to mobilize resources, both human and financial, towards a particular society. Through advocacy support, one can rally people behind the movement to address social reformation. And this is to ensure the buy-in of the society to support the advocacy campaign. Advocacy is usually an endeavor of a group of people who have similar goals or who have like-minded. This becomes their common goals that they pursue, and this becomes collaboration. And the impact of advocacy through collaboration is usually huge. And in many instances, it is the non-governmental organizations, disabled persons organizations, or huge rights movements. These entities have different roles to play in the society campaigns actions. They work towards a common goal, but they dedicate aspects of advocacy support to one another. Collaboration and clarification of roles regarding the advocacy campaign. An issue emerges in the community, and this sparks the community. As it becomes unbearable, an individual or an organization is moved. A gathering is convened where the matter is discussed and a plan of action, that is advocacy plan or campaign, is drawn up. And the people or organizations identified in the plan are then invited to the next gathering. A plan to involve a larger community are then discussed and drawn up. And people or organizations who must give a talk on this specified matter are identified and requested to make presentations on the appointment date. And the role of designing the message is dedicated to an individual or group or even the organization. And the resources required are identified and mobilized for the campaign. And the publications, leaflets, and boards for publicity are developed, prepared, and distributed among the community. On the appointment date, advocacy is completed, and all that was discussed and arranged take place. All parties performed their different roles in the fulfillment of advocacy. And advantages of clarifying the roles of others. The success of advocacy as a method of problem solving or resolution is tied in part of the advocacy philosophy of searching for solutions rather than problems. As a teacher, acting as an advocate, you may be able to find ways to resolve the community's education-related problems. In some situations, you may have to act as an education advocate and provide ongoing representational advocacy for your community. Advocates should be particularly good at identifying the strengths of their own community and should help them find ways of solving education-related problems. There are several benefits of advocacy. Advocacy helps your community's voice to be heard. It provides you with information, support, and services to help you make choices. Advocacy also helps you to get people to understand your point of view, makes it easier for you to get information in a way that you can understand, helps you to see what other services are available, helps you to choose what you want to do, helps you with expressing your views effectively, represents your community's views faithfully and effectively, and helps influential people understand the issues. And designing and maintaining conducive environment to maximize productivity and participation for all. According to Smith and Bell 2015, what constitutes an inclusive environment is the complexities of aspects influencing a roadmap that a set of institutional instructions only. Understanding concept environment. The concept environment involves a holistic concentration on the person as an individual and the sum of his or her circumstances. Making the environment conducive implies, among other things, taking appropriate measures to create accessibility for all on an equal basis. This includes people with disabilities in a natural environment where educational services are offered. People with disabilities and those at risk of exclusion can be functionally and socially excluded to participate when the environment is conducive. The conducive environment serves as an enable mechanism or system to facilitate and maximize the participation for all. The complexities of the environment encompasses the plan and the toolkit towards optional participation and productivity. An environment involves much more than providing a suitable physical environment for persons with disabilities or those at the risk of exclusion and those who experience barriers to learning. As accessible environment is also the key element of maximizing human potential and quality education, which involves much more than placement in particular setting. Creating and maintaining a conducive environment involves, among other things, the following: learning and support material. This refers to material in the accessible format, accessible reading and writing equipments for devices, and physical space. This refers to an accessible learning environment, in other words, an appropriate place and work suitable for using large braille, books, etc. And presentation. This encompasses accessibility of material when teaching. And experience. This refers to accessible learning experience. The teacher must allow first-hand experience where possible. And expectations. This refers to an accessible standard of teaching and learning. And the teacher must set a standard for the class and not for individuals. And lastly, we're speaking about giving information. This refers to accessible information. The teacher is in the main source of information. It is the primary responsibility of the teacher to mediate between the world of information and the person with disabilities. Speed of working. This refers to accessible pace. Reading Braille, one character at a time, is just a time consuming for person with low vision, as well as finding a place in a book or reading one part of a diagram at a time. Learners with disabilities or those who experience barriers to learning in the inclusive schools environment regard their safety and security as uncertain when schools and teachers allow marginalization, exclusion, and labeling. And in conclusion, identifying the need for advocacy support is crucial because these are the areas which advocacy campaigns focus on as key elements of advocacy. And this includes a need to create awareness, educating the public, mobilizing resources, and so forth. Clarifying roles in the advocacy plan helps to eliminate confusion and overlapping of activities. However, these activities must be coordinated to ensure that all goals and objectives of the advocacy are achieved. The conducive environment is critical after advocacy campaign. Now that people have been mobilized, a conducive environment must be created to cater for those persons who were marginalized and excluded. It would be self-defeating to just place people with disabilities in their environment that is completely inaccessible and where there is no material in the accessible format for learners who experience barriers to learning. And the environment for these learners must be enabling to achieve optimal participation and be productive in their work. And this marks the end of our presentation for today. Thank you.